Just because it's worthless to you doesn't mean it's worthless, period. During one of our company meetings, my legal team brought up a show that I've not heard of before called sCreek. And there was an episode there that had to do with brands and trademarks. And so I watched the show and I thought it was a great episode. And in this video, I'm going to provide my comments about the things that have to do with brands and trademarks about that episode. So that's season 2, episode 12 of the show called sCreek. Let's do this.
Fortunately, I have gotten some good news. Apparently, there is a Blouse Barn in Australia, and they are going to pay me to use their name here.
All right. So, sCreek is a Canadian show. So this woman, she owns a store somewhere in North America. We can assume it's Canada or we can assume it's US. It really doesn't matter. What she's saying is that somebody in Australia is going to pay her to use their name in North America. And it's not really clear what she's saying, but they're not going to pay her for her to use their name. They're going to pay her so that they could use their name, which happens to be also her name, right? So she's got this store called Blouse Barn, and that happens to be the same name that the Australian brand wants to bring to North America. So that's what the whole thing is about. All right, let's keep going.
Can you believe it?
That there's another store called Blouse Barn? No.
No, it's an entire chain. They're expanding into North America, and they are going to pay me $10,000 just to cover the costs of renaming the store.
Okay, so they're buying the name from you?
Well, it's more of a gesture, actually. Apparently, I have been using the name without their permission.
Now, that's a good one. So she says it's a gesture. In fact, I've been using their name without permission. She didn't need permission because she was there first in North America. She was, and these guys did not own the rights in North America. But when they approached her, they're like, well, it's gesture of goodwill. In fact, you could have said, you could be said to have been infringing on our mark. Of course, when you negotiate, you try to make your position look better, right? And especially if the other side is not really knowledgeable, if the other side is not represented by lawyers, you would give them all sorts of stuff so that whatever offer you're going to make them looks very good, right? So she bought into this idea that, in fact, she was infringing on this Australian brand, and instead of suing her, they're offering her money, and that's the gesture of goodwill. So that's kind of her initial position, and she's pretty happy about that because, as you will see, she's not super passionate about the brand of her store or about her store, period. So let's keep going.
Okay, so this company is giving you $10,000 as a gesture.
And to think I almost called this place Blouse House.
Something seems really sketchy about this, and I'm not just saying that because I have a hard time with Australians. A lot of drunks.
Well, it's already happening. They're coming in this week. They're bringing the paperwork.
As your brand manager, I feel like I need to be at that meeting.
I don't know.
At least let me talk to a few people before you decide. There's one thing I've learned from The Good Wife. It's never accept a first offer.
This is actually pretty good advice, that you have to do your research. Just because somebody's offering you something doesn't mean it's necessarily a great offer, and especially if it's something that you have no idea about, you have not done your research, you have not any context. You don't know what they are. You don't know what they do. You don't know what the average brand license would cost. Anything like that. You want to do your research. You want to have a second opinion. So that makes sense. Never accept the offer right away. Never accept the offer out of the blue.
I'm gonna just do that.
Well,
I came in here to ask whether you knew anything about trademarking store names.
Yeah, we had to deal with that from time to time at Rose Video.
And did anyone ever ask you to stop using the name?
No, but we went after other people for using it. I remember a Rosie's video in Sao Paulo. That was a fun shakedown.
So that's a good one. Because really with intellectual property and intellectual property infringement, it's always a two-edged sword, right? Because sometimes you go after somebody and sometimes somebody else goes after you. So your experience with trademark infringement could be either way. It could be about you finding that somebody's stealing your brand, or it could be somebody else who's accusing you of stealing theirs. And so the interesting part here is that he goes like, well, that was a nice shakedown, because when you own the brand that's protected, you have a lot of leverage in terms of what you can do with those whom you find infringing on your mark. So let's keep going.
Okay, well, say you owned Blouse Barn.
Well, first of all, I'd never get into the clothing business because the margins are terrible.
Okay, let's pretend for a sec. And someone was offering you $10,000 to stop using the name because there's another Blouse Barn in Australia and they need the name.
$10,000 to stop using the name Blouse Barn?
That's correct.
I would take that in a second. It's a terrible name.
It's great dialogue. But basically, he's trying to get advice. He's trying to get that second opinion. And he already has, there's an opinion he wants to hear, but he's not getting it, which is why it's so funny. So he wants to get validation of an idea he already has. But nobody's validating his idea. But it's a great way to summarize really what's going on. The offer is for her to get some money to stop using the name that everyone hates. So let's keep going.
Okay, but that's not...
Now, at least with Rose Video, it said what it was, and the logo looked great on a golf shirt.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if it's a big chain and they want the name, surely you should be able to get more for it.
Yeah, but is it worth going to court to fight it?
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great point. That's a great point. Basically, he says, yeah, you could probably get more, but what if you have to go to court and fight over it? Because if you do, then it may not be worth it. Because unfortunately, the court system is designed, in North America at least, is designed to dissuade people from using it. Only a tiny little fraction of lawsuits filed within the court system ever see the light of a courtroom, of a real trial hearing, because everything is being settled, because it's so expensive. And so over 97% of all lawsuits filed get settled. And so there's a reason behind that. And so he's saying, well, it might be possible to get more, but here they're just giving it to you without a fight. And if you had to go to court and prove that it's worth more, the whole battle might cost you more than just taking the 10K would be. And that's a valid reason, because you always need to remember that it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. It doesn't matter what the law says. The only thing that matters is what are you going to do about it, and what kind of resources are you planning to make available to get to a certain point, to get to a certain position, to get to certain recognition of who's right and who's wrong. And this way, even if you're 100% right, but you're not planning or you don't want to invest time and money in a legal fight, it doesn't matter. You could just as well be wrong. And so is the situation when you are wrong, but if you know that the other side is not going to do anything about it, well, who cares, right? So he's being practical about it to a certain degree, but let's keep watching.
Well, I don't think Wendy can afford that.
I know that we just met, but if Prince Harry trusted me with his life, then I think you can too.
Well, I do feel better having a lawyer in the room.
Oh my God, you're so cute. I'm not a lawyer, but I am glad that my fashion pony is working.
That's funny. That's funny because really it shows how shallow really people could be, but that's what makes it so important. The first impression, right? There's only one chance to make the first impression, and there's certain perception by people of who should look how. And I remember Dan Kennedy, the grandfather of direct marketing. He told us, I think it was the best story I've ever heard in terms of looking the part. It says, imagine you buy tickets to the new Spider-Man movie, and you've been waiting to see the new film for weeks, and finally you get the tickets. You go to the theater, you get into your seat, you struggle through all the commercials. Finally, the movie begins. The lights go out, and the first thing you see is a huge skyscraper, and in the middle of that skyscraper, there's a guy climbing up, and they zoom in on the guy, and he is just wearing some old Adidas pants and sneakers in a sweaty, t-shirt. He'd be pretty upset that he doesn't look like Spider-Man, right? That he looks just something that doesn't look the part. It says that's what people feel when you don't look the part, which is why you'll see me, wear suits in a lot of my videos, and depending on the series, right? So that's me looking the part. That's me giving people what they expect. And not all of them I'm wearing suit and tie, but like, for example, I'm not wearing suit and tie now. But that's interesting how people perceive other people based on their clothes. Another thing that my mentor always says, Dan Locke, he says, it doesn't take any effort to look sloppy. And when you don't look sloppy, people notice. And I really like that. It doesn't take any effort to look sloppy. So, for whatever it's worth, let's keep watching.
Oh, hi. I'm Wendy Kurtz. Welcome to Blouse Barn.
Lisa Chung. I didn't realize there were going to be more of us.
We're her representation.
David Rose.
It's actually funny. I don't know if you see it. I don't know if it's a glitch. I don't know if it's intentional. Here, it looks like there's a hole in her dress, right? So I don't know if it's intentional that she just picked up something that has a hole in it, because obviously she's not a lawyer. She's just trying to look like one, or if it's wardrobe malfunction.
Well, let's go to my office, shall we?
This shouldn't take long. The check. This should cover the cost of the signs, business cards.
About that check.
We had some questions about the amount.
Well, you shouldn't. $10,000 is the amount we agreed upon.
Well, that may be, but some things have changed on our side, and we want to discuss the...
I think it's fine, David.
From a legal standpoint, there are lots of costs to consider. There are the signs and the business cards.
I just mentioned those.
So yes, of course, she mentions good dialogue, it's good characters. But the funny thing, she says, from the legal perspective, business cards and this, it's not from the legal side. It's the opposite of the legal side. It's business side, right? There's no law that says, well, you gotta reimburse for the business cards. It's up to the attorneys to build up that case, maybe that looks convincing that that's this kind of stuff that needs to be compensated for, but it has nothing to do with law and everything to do with making a case for, if you want it, you gotta make sure that we're not losing money, and here's how we could lose money because of your proposal. So let's keep going.
Objection sustained. There is the travel. There are the meals. There is the shipping and the catering.
Which is very similar to the meals and not necessarily relevant, so...
It's actually a funny dynamic. I know they're both not lawyers, but it's not uncommon when, especially when new lawyers work in teams, they really try very hard to show the client how useful they are, how valuable they are, and sometimes their discussion is very similar to this, right? They're trying to educate each other during negotiation. But really what happens even more is when two junior attorneys, clash from representing different sides. That's when even more of that happens, when each of them tries to justify their value to their client by just arguing over things that don't mean anything, right? It doesn't have any business advantage to argue those, not even from the tactical perspective. It doesn't make any difference from the legal perspective, but they would spend hours and hours just discussing things that have absolutely no value to either side, except maybe they're making their billable hours, right? But it's all about ego. It's not really about billable hours. It's about ego and showing how important they are and how much they know. And you will see that a lot with recent graduates and just junior attorneys. And not to be sexist here, I see a lot more of that in women, because they have a lot more to prove. Maybe they feel they need to prove that they're not just pretty, they're also smart, and sometimes they just try to overcompensate this by let me show you this, you're not, right? I've seen a lot of that. And look, there's a whole bunch of amazing women lawyers. Our legal team are all women, and they know so much about trademarks that many other companies would envy, and they do. But like I said, in terms of my observation with negotiations like that, I see this all the time. When a woman attorney would just go out of her way to prove to everyone that she's not just a pretty face, but she's also a great lawyer. So let's keep going.
Well, the $10,000 doesn't even cover our legal fees.
What?
So
Don't worry about that.
And if we're going to announce a new name, there has to be a whole relaunch event, and that involves event planners and florists.
Okay, I think
and,
what my colleague is trying to say is that our brand is very well established here. So we're going to require a higher compensation.
Putting aside the way he says this, and putting aside the idea that the brand, of course, is not well established. It's a tiny little store that's about to go bankrupt. But he's trying to make a point that the brand, when it's well established, when the brand owner has done something to promote the brand, to protect the brand, that is the grounds for increased value of that brand. And that's the point he's trying to make. Again, whether it has any foundation behind it is a different issue. Probably there isn't in this case, but at least he's trying to push the right buttons. Let's keep going.
Okay, well, Blouse Barn Australia is willing to offer you an additional $5,000.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
So if you'll just sign here, I think we're good.
I don't think we are. I have done some research, and I happen to know that your company pulled in $100 million last year.
Point being?
Well, point is, judging by your bag and those shoes, Blouse Barn Australia is paying you quite a bit of money to come here and help us switch over our signs.
That's a great point.
Bottom line, we're standing in your way, and I don't think your client will be very happy if you come home without securing the rights to the name, especially considering you're expanding into 78 stores across North America, and let's be honest, Blouse House doesn't have quite the same ring to it.
Well, now, this is a great point. Actually, a lot of great points. Timing, right? Pretty much every negotiation book teaches you that timing and space are all very important. Who controls the time and who controls the space has a huge advantage in negotiation, which is why sometimes when you really want to get a concession from the other party, you set the time for negotiation so that it's very, very inconvenient for the other side when they're pressed for time. So, maybe, it's their birthday. So you go and you set the appointment at, 4 p.m. on their birthday. So you know how much they're going to be willing to get out of that negotiation, and they'd be willing to give you more than they would have otherwise if they had more time, right? So here he's making pretty much the same point, that the company that sent her wouldn't send her if they really weren't interested in the deal. And they're paying her a lot of money, and probably they're not paying her a lot of money just to come back empty-handed. Again, just goes back to how you show up, and sometimes it can backfire because when people look at you as more successful than you're trying to look like, well, you're expected to be successful, right? And a lot more is expected from successful people than not. So let's keep going.
Exactly.
Angelica, please. This is the number that we are after.
How are we to know what the number
Now,
is?
if you'll excuse us, we have another meeting to get to.
We're in our store.
We await your reply.
David, come on in. Here, have a seat. Lisa got back to me. She dropped off a check. It's a big check, David.
Oh, thank God.
It's a big fucking check!
You don't mean one of those big lottery checks, right? Okay.
But you pulled it off.
Thank you for trusting me.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
So you see how happy she is for getting rid of her brand in exchange for a certain amount of money, for an undisclosed amount of money. That's really what I opened this video with. Sometimes what's worthless to you may not be worthless, period. It may have a lot of value to somebody else. Well, here they don't really say whether she trademarked the brand or didn't. What matters is that because she was here first, she could have made their journey harder. And I mean, if it was Trademark, then their journey would have been impossible for them to come to North America. But what Australians realized, and what was very clear in these negotiations, is that you cannot open a chain of what is it, 78 stores in North America unless you have full clear rights to the brand. You'd be crazy to do that, because the brand is really everything. If you have more than one location, if people buy from you because of the brand, if people recognize you because of the brand, you'd be absolutely crazy to build that brand without owning it. And that's what the Australians understood. And well, they made a decision to buy it from this store, because that was the easier path for them, rather than maybe coming up with a new name and running two brands, one in Australia and one in North America. So everyone seems to be very happy. Let's finish this off.
Okay. I guess we should get back to work then.
I love your enthusiasm, but I think I'm going to take some time for my family, for me, and close the store.
Oh.
Closing the store.
But I appreciate all you've done, and I want you to have this. You and Alexis.
Oh, Alexis didn't do that much. Oh my God.
And I hope this helps get you on your feet and do something interesting. You always do.
I can't accept this.
It's so funny. He says, "I can't accept this," and he pockets the check.
So.
$40,000?
Oh, that's a lot of money.
So she paid them $40,000. So apparently the Australian company paid her more than that. And she's very happy with the outcome. And again, obviously this is a fictional story, but and it's a comedy, but the point is still valid. The point is still valid. Sometimes other people would value your brand more than you do. And they may take it from you, or they may buy it from you. And you want to be very clear about what you're building. So if your brand is worthless to you, maybe it's still worth doing something with it, that it becomes your asset that you can then sell or license or franchise. And if the brand is worthless to you, well, maybe it's time for you to come up with a different brand. We've just published a video called Jump Brands, JUMP Brands. I suggest you watch that. It's a new concept that I came up with. I'm running with this idea, so it's very near and dear to my heart. But big chunk of that is the first letter J, juicy, right? If you don't love your brand, nobody's going to love your brand more than you do. People may love the name, but they love that brand for themselves rather than for your products and services. So if you're building something, you got to be in love with the brand. And like I said, watch that whole video. I think you'll find a lot of things that are useful. So let's keep going.
Wow, even divided amongst the four of us.
Divided?
Like, I'm not getting
I'm the
money.
one who negotiated all of this.
With my help, David.
I believe I offered advice.
You said Wendy should cave and take the first offer. What you gave was the opposite of advice.
Okay, stop. This is good. This is the first real money we've seen in a year.
And that's how sometimes things work, right? Sometimes you get a consultant and have no idea what they're doing. They're broke. They're sometimes even broker than you are. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't offer good advice, but it's tough. It's tough. And some of them will offer bad advice. So anyway, the moral of the story is this. If you are serious about your business, you gotta own the brand. Sometimes you gotta go an extra mile and actually buy that brand from somebody else. Sometimes you gotta negotiate. Sometimes you gotta fight. And one thing you cannot do is build a successful business with a successful brand if you don't own that brand. And the only way to own that brand is for you to trademark it. So that's really the comments that I have for you about Schitt's Creek. I think it's a great episode. I think it's funny little show. And if you liked it, if you liked my comments, comment below and like this video. And yeah, make sure to watch other episodes if you like the show. And if you got a brand that you want to protect, whether you're an Australian company who wants to take over in North America or the other way around, or really doesn't matter where you are or where you need a trademark, because with Trademark Factory, you offer the easiest way to trademark your brand risk-free, guaranteed anywhere. So go to trademarkfactory.com and book your call with one of our strategy advisors, and they'll help you get started. And until then, I will see you in the next video.